how governments really make money. Every country spends money on roads, on schools, on healthcare, on security, on salaries, on massive infrastructure projects. And when you look at the scale of that spending, it raises a simple question. Where does all that money come from? At first, the answer seems obvious. Taxes, people work, businesses operate, income is generated, and a portion of that is collected by the government. That's the basic idea most people understand. But here's the problem. Taxes alone are not enough. In many countries, government spending is far greater than the amount collected through taxes, which means there must be more to the system. And that's where things start to get more complex. Because governments don't just collect money. They create systems that generate it. And some of those systems are not immediately visible. To understand how governments really make money, we need to go beyond taxes. Let's start with the most familiar one. Taxes are the foundation. Income tax, sales tax, corporate tax, property tax. Each one targets a different part of economic activity, and together, they create a steady flow of revenue. But taxes have limits. Raise them too high, and people push back. Lower them too much, and revenue drops. So governments must balance carefully, which means taxes alone cannot always support growing expenses. This is where another method comes in. Borrowing. Governments don't just spend what they collect. They also borrow money, and they borrow at a massive scale. From investors, from institutions, from other countries. This borrowing is done through something called bonds. A government bond is essentially a promise. The government takes money now and promises to pay it back later with interest. This allows governments to access large amounts of money quickly, much more than taxes alone could provide. But borrowing creates debt, and debt must be repaid, which means future budgets must include repayment. So borrowing is not free money. It shifts the cost into the future. But here's where things become even more interesting, because governments can continue borrowing as long as investors believe they will repay, which creates a cycle. Borrow, spend, grow economy, generate revenue, repay, borrow again. And as long as the system holds, it continues. But there is another method, one that is less visible, but extremely powerful. Creating money. Governments, through central banks, have the ability to increase the money supply. This does not mean printing physical cash like in the past. It often happens digitally. New money is created within the financial system, and that money enters the economy through various channels. Loans, government spending, financial programs. This increases liquidity, makes borrowing easier, supports economic activity. But it also has consequences, because when more money exists, each unit of money can become less valuable. This leads to inflation. Prices rise. Purchasing power changes. And while inflation is often seen as a problem, it is also part of how the system functions. Because moderate inflation can make debt easier to manage, it reduces the real value of money over time, which means past debts become relatively smaller. So, in a way, inflation becomes another indirect source of financial flexibility. At this point, the system starts to come together. Governments do not rely on one source of money. They combine multiple systems. Taxes, borrowing, money creation, each serving a different purpose, each supporting the others. But this leads to a deeper question. If governments can borrow and even create money, why are there limits? Why can't they simply generate unlimited funds? And what happens when these systems are pushed too far? How the system really works, and where the risk begins. By now, the basic structure is clear. Governments don't rely on just one source of money. They use three main tools: taxes, borrowing, and money creation. But these are not separate systems. They are connected. And once you see how they interact, you begin to understand both the power and the risk of how governments make money. Let's start with the connection between taxes and borrowing. Taxes provide steady income, but they are limited. Governments cannot suddenly double taxes without consequences. It would slow economic activity, reduce business growth, and create public resistance. So when spending increases beyond tax revenue, governments turn to borrowing. Borrowing allows immediate spending, without immediate tax increases. This makes it politically easier, because the cost is delayed. Instead of paying today, the burden is spread into the future. But borrowing depends on trust. Investors must believe the government will repay, and that belief is based on several factors: economic strength, political stability, past repayment history. If confidence is strong, borrowing becomes easier. Interest rates remain lower. More investors are willing to lend. But if confidence weakens, everything changes. Interest rates rise. Borrowing becomes more expensive, and in extreme cases, access to borrowing can shrink. This is where the system becomes fragile. Because once borrowing becomes expensive, governments face difficult choices: raise taxes, cut spending, or find another way. And that other way often leads to the third tool: money creation. When governments need support, central banks can increase the money supply. This is often done through financial operations, buying government bonds, injecting liquidity into the system, lowering interest rates, all designed to make money more available. At first, this seems like a perfect solution. More money supports the economy, encourages borrowing, increases spending. But there's a trade-off, because increasing the money supply affects value. When more money enters the system, without a matching increase in goods and services, prices begin to rise. This is inflation. And inflation changes everything, because it affects purchasing power. The same amount of money buys less over time. For individuals, this feels like rising costs. But from a system perspective, it has another effect. It reduces the real value of debt. If a government owes money and inflation rises, the real burden of that debt decreases, because future payments are made with money that is worth less. So inflation becomes part of the system's balancing mechanism, not always intentional, but often unavoidable. At this point, something important becomes clear. Governments are not just managing money, they are managing balance between growth and stability, between spending and revenue, between short-term needs and long-term sustainability. But maintaining that balance is not easy, because each tool has limits. Taxes can only go so high. Borrowing depends on trust. Money creation risks inflation, and pushing any one tool too far creates consequences. So governments must constantly adjust, sometimes increasing taxes, sometimes borrowing more, sometimes expanding the money supply, all depending on economic conditions. But there is another layer influencing all of this: economic cycles. Economies do not grow in a straight line. They expand, slow down, contract, recover, and during downturns, government spending often increases. More support programs, more economic stimulus, more intervention. But at the same time, tax revenue often decreases, which widens a gap. And that gap is usually filled through borrowing or money creation. So, during difficult periods, these systems become more active. But when the economy recovers, the expectation is to stabilize, reduce deficits, manage debt. However, this is not always easy, because once spending increases, reducing it can be difficult. Programs become permanent. Expectations grow. Political resistance increases. So the system continues expanding. Gradually, over time, this creates larger budgets, higher debt levels, more complex financial structures. But as long as the system remains stable, it continues functioning, because stability is based on confidence. Confidence in the economy, confidence in institutions, confidence in the currency. As long as people believe the system works, it continues working. But when that confidence weakens, the effects can spread quickly. Higher interest rates, currency pressure, reduced investment, which makes managing the system even more difficult. At this stage, the system looks less like a simple flow of money and more like a constantly adjusting mechanism, one that depends on balance, trust, and continuous management. But this leads to the final question. If governments rely on these interconnected systems, and each has its own risks, what happens over the long term? Does the system become stronger or more fragile? Can this system last forever? At this point, the structure is clear. Governments don't just earn money, they manage a system built on taxes, borrowing, and money creation. And as long as those three tools stay in balance, the system works. But that leads to the biggest question of all. Can it keep working forever? At first glance, it seems like it can, because governments have something unique. They control currency. They have the power to tax. They have access to borrowing at massive scale. This gives them flexibility that individuals or companies don't have. A company can go bankrupt. An individual can run out of money, but a government operates differently. It can adjust, raise taxes, borrow more, expand the money supply, so the system doesn't collapse easily. Instead, it adapts. But adaptation does not mean unlimited power, because every system has limits. And those limits don't always appear suddenly. They build slowly. Over time, the first limit is debt. Borrowing works well as long as it remains manageable. But as debt grows, so do the costs of maintaining it. Interest payments increase. A larger portion of the budget goes towards servicing past borrowing, which leaves less room for new spending. At some point, the question shifts from how much can we borrow to how much can we afford to repay? And this is where pressure begins to build. Because if too much of a government's budget is used to pay interest, it becomes harder to invest in growth, infrastructure, education, healthcare, which can slow the economy. And when growth slows, tax revenue slows too, which makes debt harder to manage. So the system starts to tighten. But there is another limit: confidence. Everything in this system depends on trust. Investors must believe that governments will repay their debt. People must believe in the value of the currency. Markets must believe the system is stable. If that confidence holds, the system continues smoothly. But if it weakens, the effects can spread quickly. Borrowing becomes more expensive. Interest rates rise. Currencies can lose value. And once confidence drops, it is difficult to restore, because perception spreads faster than policy. But there is still another limit: inflation. As we've seen, increasing the money supply can support the economy, but if it is used too aggressively, it can lead to higher inflation. And inflation affects everyone. Prices rise. Savings lose value. Purchasing power decreases. If inflation becomes too high, it creates instability. People lose confidence in money itself. And when that happens, the system faces serious pressure. But not all inflation is extreme. In fact, moderate inflation is often part of a functioning economy. The challenge is control. Too little inflation can slow growth. Too much can destabilize it. So governments and central banks constantly adjust, trying to maintain balance. But balance is not static. It shifts with global conditions, economic changes, political decisions, which makes long-term stability difficult to guarantee. Then there is another factor: global interconnectedness. Modern economies are not isolated. They are linked through trade, finance, investment, supply chains, which means one country's financial decisions can affect others. And global events can influence local economies. So the system is not just national, it is global, which adds another layer of complexity. Because managing a national economy is already difficult, managing it within a global system is even more challenging. But despite all these limits, the system continues because it evolves. When pressure builds in one area, adjustments are made in another. Taxes may change, spending may shift, interest rates may move, policies adapt, and that adaptability is what keeps the system running. Not perfection, but continuous adjustment. At this point, something important becomes clear. The system is not designed to be perfect. It is designed to be flexible, to respond, to absorb shocks, to keep functioning even under pressure. But flexibility has a cost, because constant adjustment means constant change, and constant change creates uncertainty, which is why economic systems are never fully stable. They move, they shift, they respond, and governments operate within that movement, trying to maintain balance without full control. So when people ask, can governments just keep borrowing forever? The answer is not simple. They can continue for a long time, but not without limits, because those limits are not fixed numbers. They are based on conditions, confidence, growth, stability, and those conditions can change, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly. But there is one final idea that ties everything together: sustainability. A system is sustainable not when it avoids problems entirely, but when it can manage them over time. And government finance is exactly that: a system of management, balancing competing forces, adjusting to changing conditions, maintaining confidence. As long as that balance is maintained, the system continues. But if the balance breaks, the consequences can be significant, not just for governments, but for entire economies. And that is why the system matters, because it is not just about money. It shapes growth, opportunity, stability, and ultimately the direction of entire countries. And that leaves one final question. If the system depends so heavily on balance and confidence, what happens when that balance is pushed too far? And who decides where that limit really is?